So a lot of you don't realize that there's a battle going on, and we're in the trenches, right? Hackers and cyber criminals are waging war on our systems and our clients and our vendors every day. So when a hacker actually gets into a system, they like to grab credentials. They gobble them up so they can get to everywhere, right? Those credentials, they end up in a big list. They'll prospect until they feel like they've done everything they could, or the juice just isn't worth the squeeze anymore. Those credential lists, well, they end up being shared with their friends and the hacking community, or just out on the dark web. But the good news is there's organizations full of good guys who monitor. They take note of all those email addresses they find in these lists on the dark web. Right. So one of the organizations is called Have I Been Pwned? What they do is they try to match credential lists that they find with any recent breaches to help inform the public about their credentials being leaked. So you can actually go to their website. You can type in your email address and see if it was ever spotted in a breach. Um, Another organization is called Leak Lookup. Now, Leak Lookup, what they did is they compiled the largest collection of the credential lists with over 26 billion credentials with a B. And then they got hacked. All the credentials were leaked on the dark web. We're looking at over 12 terabytes of data from over 4,100 breaches. They're all just dumped out there for everyone to see. So there's in the list, there's like .gov accounts from like 14 different states, along with government accounts from around the world. There's educational institutes like Harvard and Purdue, and hundreds of millions of credentials from names like MySpace, Twitter, Adobe, and not that any of you would go there, Adult Friend Finder. So this list is it's so big. It's being called the mother of all breaches. Right? I don't know if you've heard that Moab, mother of all bombs, has been used in the past. This is now mother of all breaches. So with the list going so public, right, new hackers are going to pick up on where everyone left off. They're going to be testing these passwords. So even if the credentials were changed at some point for a specific breach, many people use the same password for multiple services, right? So are you thinking what I'm thinking, right? Oh crap! How many times did I use 1 2 3 4 5 for my password? Um, next slide. So if you haven't already, I'd recommend going and just checking your email address on Have I Been Pwned? Websites there on the slide deck. And I'd also recommending updating your passwords, right? If you've got some older services that you kind of forgot about or haven't been using in a while, if it's linked to your credit card, especially, right? Just go in there, make sure you've got a good password. It's unique to the website, right? It's complex. And look, if it's too difficult to keep track of, I recommend a password manager. They're fairly affordable. I think I spend $15 a year for a password manager. They type in my password for me. They come up with random generated passwords. They're always unique, right? So it can really kind of help protect you in that way, and you can get ahead of the hackers if you know that your account's been breached, right, at some point. So next slide. Right, perfect. Thank you. So we're going to move kind of in a different direction. There's other ways that hackers like to get into your systems, right? And one of them is supply chain attacks. What they do is they actually use your trusted and your secure channels by exploiting the relationship that you have with your vendors. So this is kind of in the same way you would win a war by poisoning the water well. Right? Hackers can get to your software before you do. And in 2019, this is exactly what happened with a Texas-based software company called SolarWinds. You guys have probably heard of them. They're huge. They provide server management and monitoring software for thousands of customers all over the world, right? And when the hackers got into their system, right, they didn't ransomware them. They had their eyes on the big prize, right? They modified their software code. They got in there and reprogrammed it. So when the next time the software was, up for update. It got pushed out to all the customers. The bad guys, they already had a back door, right? They've already tainted the well. So, as all good customers do, they would update their software and found themselves under attack. The bad guys were in their environment. So, who are the customers of SolarWinds, right? How about the Department of Commerce, defense, or energy, right? The guys who control our nuclear arsenal. What about the Department of Homeland Security, Justice, State, Treasury, right? The National Institutes of Health was affected. And these are just the ones that we know about, right? So I'm sure that not every agency wanted to be forthcoming on this, right? And in all, nearly 18,000 customers were affected by an update that looked completely legitimate, and it passed all the tests. After this, the SEC brought up charges against the Chief Information Security Officer for SolarWinds, the CISO. They alleged that he misled investors. He failed to disclose some known risks, and he didn't have adequate controls. So of course, SolarWinds is filing for dismissal, and the big deal here is that these are criminal charges, right? The implications are very real. And not to mention our government being, breached at almost every level. That's pretty scary. So you might think, okay, well, if the government, right, if they're getting hacked, what chance does my business have? Well, this is kind of where having a layered approach to security is critical, right? You defend your network with a firewall, your computers with antivirus. It's time to step it up, right? It's time to add another layer. One that I would recommend for this situation is having managed detection and response services. So these guys, it's a security team, right? They monitor your internal network and devices, make sure there's no bad guys in there. Right? This is all day, every day, the whole year round, no breaks. And if they see something suspicious, they kick the bad guy out and they send you an alert. Even if it's 2 in the morning, ask me how I know. Next slide. So to continue down that layered approach path, there's a lot more we can do. I mean, honestly, we can spin till we're blue in the face, but there are some really big gaps that I think we need to address, right? Training our frontline with security awareness is huge, right? You're putting your team to the test before they go into battle, right? And it's also a huge checkbox for almost every cyber insurance questionnaire out there. They really want to see that you're training your employees. Multi-factor is another huge check mark for cyber insurance, and honestly, it's the biggest shield against things like business email compromise. Right? If you're not using multi-factor on your email right now, you're wrong. You got to fix it by the end of the year. You got to get it done. So, kind of to wrap up what we've looked at so far, right? We've looked at password managers, right? Having unique passwords for everything, managed detection and response. The bouncers for your network. Security awareness training, multi-factor authentication. Really, and this is kind of the biggest thing that I can give you or can leave you with today is really in almost every case of a breach, it's cheaper to spend the money up front to prevent or stop the breach than it is to deal with the fallout afterwards, right? And it's not all monetary. Sometimes it's reputational, right? Your business could be ruined because you've helped infect all of your clients or you've helped infect all of your vendors and no one wants to work with you anymore, right? So everything that you do in your business, right, you need to make sure you're budgeting and considering cybersecurity, right, for all the aspects of your business, right? I'm opening a new office. What do I need to do to make sure it's secure, right? Do I need cameras? I need alarm? I need firewall, right? How do I integrate that into my cybersecurity, right? I'm deploying new software to make my employees more efficient. Is the software secure? Right? What has that vendor done to protect us from hackers? Is the software, is it in the cloud? Is their cloud, is it in a safe location? Is it encrypted? Some considerations. And honestly, right, if you've got questions and you're not sure, like how to answer some of that. Let's go next slide. We are actually giving any attendee here, right, a free cybersecurity consultation. So, got these questions floating around in your head. We would be certainly happy to kind of help point you in the right direction and get you on those tracks.
And Matthew,
That is going to be it.
we do have a couple questions.
Sure.
What are the top cybersecurity threats and protection strategies for 2024?
Right. Well, I mean, I think getting into that layered approach, right, is the right strategy, right? Start working from the biggest gaps you have, and working down. And the biggest threats, I would say, ransomware, business email compromise, and supply chain attacks. I would say those are going to be the top threats.
There was another question here. What are the key strategies to defend against supply chain attacks specifically?
So there's a couple of things you can do. Having really good antivirus is one, right? So there was some software that was that we dealt with earlier. Was it this year, the year before, where the vendor had pushed out some software updates, and of course everyone updated, and our antivirus caught it. Said, hey, this is wrong. Something's not working right here. This is a virus. And of course, we reached out to the vendor. Vendor said, no, it's not a virus. And eventually they had to eat crow and come back and say, yeah, it was. We got breached. We were affected. It was a virus, right? So having good, strong antivirus, having someone inside of your network watching it, the MDR service, the managed detection and response, because really it's not about if they're going to get in, it's about when they're going to get in. What do you do at that point, right? We can build all the walls, but once they're in, they're in. Having someone watching your network is another big step.
Okay, we have another question here. Is there a chance the password company might get hacked?
Yes, yeah, and that does happen, right? So, like, if you're talking about password management managers, it does happen. It's very common, unfortunately. Right, you got to pick one that you trust, and if there's an opportunity that they get hacked or something, and I would go and change my passwords. And if you've got a really super important password, maybe you don't put it in the password manager, right? Like your bank.
And Matthew, could you just go over really quick what Upright does and what you guys are great at?
Yeah. So we're a managed service provider, right? Any IT services you really need. I mean, it's full end-to-end IT assistance, help desk, projects, infrastructure, of course, security. So kind of the whole deal.
Thank you. And now I think we're gonna hand it off to Tom to talk a little bit about some cyber insurance and what's on the horizon for 2024.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Tom Culp with Crandall Associates Insurance Agency. We handle insurance for all aspects of your life, whether it be for your business, your home and auto, or for your employee benefit. We are family owned and operated, and we have been serving our community for 37 years. We're really proud of that. Of course, I am today's speaker. Those fancy letters after my name just mean certified insurance counselor, certified risk manager, and commercial lines coverage specialist. And I manage the property and casualty department here at Crandall Associates. I also do want to apologize. I believe I was the only one tasked with starting the meeting, and I seem to have failed on that. I did not realize I was the only one with that button, so apologies there, but we'll get you guys all taken care of here by the end of the presentation. So how do we get cyber insurance, right? As Matthew kind of alluded to, we have cyber insurance questionnaires. And so every carrier is going to require an application to be completed in order to provide a bindable quote. And so some of the IT controls that carriers are looking for at a minimum, kind of like Matthew was saying, we need to have up-to-date antivirus, firewalls, and computer systems. And what I mean by that is like your operating systems, or if you have servers on premise, having up-to-date server software. And they're also looking for regular backups of data. That is very, very important, especially in today's cyber environment. And then if you accept credit cards, they are also looking to make sure that you are compliant with the payment card industry standards. Now, some best practices would be implementing encryption. That could be from your mobile devices, laptops, things of that nature, all the way through to your server. Of course, you can talk to your IT providers or someone like Upright about something like that. But also, as Matthew kind of alluded to, utilizing that multi-factor authentication, especially with regards to email. As he said, if you're not doing that for email by the end of the year, you should be, and I would challenge you to do it by summer, to be quite honest. Also, if you're allowing people remote access to your network, if you have people working from home that remote into your network environment at the office, you should also be utilizing multi-factor for that. And most certainly on any type of admin or privileged user accounts with regards to your domain, your router, firewall, all that kind of good stuff. And then, we get this question a lot, what coverage is necessary, right? This can all depend on your industry, and we'll kind of dive into these a little bit more on the next slide, but you always want first and third party coverages. And what we mean by that is anytime you hear first party in insurance, you want to think of all the things that come out of your pocket that you have to pay for. Third party, you want to think that as liability, things you have to pay other people for. And so kind of like Matthew said, the two highest claim areas or things to watch out for is certainly ransomware, people hacking in and encrypting your data and holding it for ransom, as well as social engineering. And here again, we'll kind of talk about that on the next slide. And so a question we get a lot is, do I need a cyber policy? Well, if you do not know, federal law actually requires the following when you suffer a data breach. You have to hire forensic IT services to determine the extent of the breach and whose information was compromised. And those forensic IT services typically cost you about what an attorney does per hour, so it is not cheap. You also have to notify all of those individuals that were affected, typically by paper mail. And then you have to set up a credit monitoring service for them for up to 1 year. So that leads me to say that every business needs a cyber policy, but limits and coverage may vary. And if you are not aware, the average cost of a data breach in 2023 was $4.5 million, and that comes from IBM. And we'll also kind of talk about what isn't covered here in a cyber policy. So they all differ based on carrier, which makes agents' lives a whole lot of fun. But generally, you can find the following included. Under first party, we have those things that we kind of talked about that are required by federal law, the forensic IT costs, the notification costs, the credit monitoring. Also, what can fall under that is your business interruption coverage. So if you are a business that operates online, you have an e-commerce site, or shoot, even for our business, if we do not have internet and I don't have email, I can't really work or do my job. And so they will also pay for business interruption loss that you may encounter. And then you also have crisis management and public relations expenses, kind of like Matthew was alluding to, the reputational harm that these breaches can cause. Your clients don't want to work with you anymore because they don't feel that your data is safe with them, and you lose those clients. That is something that happens all the time, and you do have coverage within the policy to pay for PR, to let the public know you were breached, and all that kind of good stuff. Third party, and here again, talking about liability, this is really coverage for people suing you over the breach of their information. So within that comes network security liability, which is essentially for, you did not keep your network secure enough and somebody hacked your system and stole data. Lawsuits for that specific purpose would fall under your network security liability coverage. We also have things like media liability in case you transmit a virus to a client through email. And you also have coverage in there for any regulatory fines that may be placed upon you, as well as the payment card industry fines. So the additional coverages that we have in there, definitely we talked about ransomware, social engineering. It's a really weird term for it, but essentially what that means is, let's say, I'm out of town and somebody hacks into my email or spoofs my email and sends an email to our finance manager here in the office and says, hey, I got a call from XYZ vendor. They said we did not pay them. It's probably because their payment information changed. Here's all their new info. Please process payment to them ASAP. That is what we call social engineering, when they actually do process the funds to that unknown party. And then what you also have in there is invoice manipulation. So this actually came out after social engineering, because what then started happening, people started getting smart about, the emails that are coming into them, at least from their own employees or owners. But invoice manipulation comes into play when somebody tries to manipulate one of your invoices and sends it to your client and tries to get them to pay them. The hacker or whoever was able to spoof your email. That's invoice manipulation. And then telephone hacking, that also came about, especially with the voice over IP phones. We've actually had that happen to a client. They hacked their VoIP phone and racked up about $5,000 in long distance calls to Cuba, which is odd, but it can happen. So what's not covered, right? Any type of fraudulent, criminal, or malicious acts. That is not what insurance is intended for. Of course, when we're talking about rogue employees, an employee downloads a bunch of your data and tries to sell it on the dark web. That's a little different. What they're talking about there is the insured, and that is effectively the owners of the company, right? Whoever has an ownership stake within that entity, they want to make sure you're not doing any fraudulent or criminal acts, right? Next would be intentional violations of the law. Of course, insurance is not there to help you pay to break the law. And then we also have exclusions in there for prior and pending knowledge or notices and proceedings. We cannot buy insurance to cover past events. They want you to purchase it before the event happens. Another thing we get a lot is intellectual property. People ask me all the time if cyber can cover their intellectual property. No, it cannot. There are other policies out there, but just wanted to point that out to everybody. And then unsolicited communications as well is not covered. And there's also many, many other things within that cyber that would not be covered as well, but those are definitely the big sticking points for you. And so what are some of the latest updates for 2024? Really, the latest updates in the cyber coverage has been with GDPR. That was Europe's data privacy law that passed, I think it was in 2022. And so the coverage was amended in order to provide coverage for violations of that law. I can't tell you what's in the law because I do not have clients that do work in Europe, but you can have coverage for it under the cyber if you need it. Invoice manipulation, as we talked about, after people were getting very smart on social engineering, they started doing the invoice manipulation tactics. And so we have added coverage for that. And then carriers have also moved to exclude biometric privacy violations. So many devices these days track our biometric data, and carriers are not willing to pay for any violations of that kind of privacy. And so how do we choose the right policy? This is, here again, heavily dependent on your industry, who you serve, as well as your annual revenue and the amount of personal information or health information you obtain or store on behalf of your customers. So for example, if you are a business that you don't collect or store personal or health information, you would certainly want to get coverage from ransomware and social engineering, as those are the two highest claim areas in cyber right now. But you probably wouldn't need to carry very high first and third party limits, maybe 250,000, 500, just in case. But you wouldn't need to do a whole lot of a high limit there. A business that is a medical practice would need to carry high first and third party limits. as here again, as well as coverage for ransomware and social engineering. The cost of a breach when it comes to health records versus personal records is vastly different. And so you absolutely want to make sure you have high first and third party limits if you're storing personal health information on people. And lastly, another example would be a business that solely operates an online web store would definitely need good third party limits, and really want to carry very high first party coverages for the potential impact to the business interruption coverage. You know, if you generate 100,000 in sales per month on this website and it goes down for a month, you want to make sure, you know, that you have enough coverage in there. If it goes down for 6 months, you know, here again, you want to make sure you have enough coverage for that business interruption loss. And then what happens if you do have a claim, right? So if you have a cyber policy, every carrier utilizes third-party providers for the data breach consultants, essentially. So you have breach coordinators who will help coordinate the notification costs as well as the credit monitoring. You'll also have vendors in there that will help with the forensic IT, as well as crisis management that can help set you up with some PR companies that specialize in this area. And so effectively what happens, how you want to start that claim, you certainly want to notify your in-house or third-party IT provider immediately. Most likely they already know about it, but just in case, make sure you do notify them. But do not spend too much time on the phone with them initially. You know, you want to tell them about the problem and then call your carrier as your very next step. They will help you set up with these different providers and to provide you with further direction, and you can connect them with your third-party IT or in-house so that they can work on the claim together. And you always never want to delay in filing a cyber claim. It is extremely important to file it as soon as possible. Timing is everything when it comes to cyber claims. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. And then just some tips for you guys in a cyber claim, you know, always be forthcoming and don't try to hide anything from the carrier. You know, if you know you or your employee clicked on a bad attachment in an email, tell them where it originated. That will help save them time and help save your claim costs at the end of the day. And responsiveness is also key. If your IT or the carrier's IT, your data breach coordinators are asking something of you, please do it as soon as possible. You know, the cyber claim should definitely be your number one priority above all else until that gets resolved, or at least in a good place to where things are not, you know, really, really bad. I don't want to use a better term there, but I will not due to professionalism. And of course, just like Upright, we are going to offer to anybody that attended today, if you have a current cyber policy, we are going to offer to review it for you to make sure you have all the